There's something quietly strange about silence in the digital world we live in. We exist in an era where almost everything is shared: birthdays, morning coffee, sunsets, tears, laughter, even pain, carefully packaged and filtered for public view. And yet, some people remain almost completely invisible. They scroll without a trace. They absorb everything, but they rarely, if ever, post anything themselves. Chances are you know someone like that. Maybe that person is you. And the question that lingers, unspoken but persistent, is always the same: why? Why would anyone choose to stay unseen when the world seems to be constantly begging for attention? The easy answer is to assume they're just shy, private, or introverted. But that explanation barely touches the truth. Beneath the surface, there's a deeper psychological story unfolding, one that reveals a lot about identity, self awareness, and a quiet resistance to a culture obsessed with visibility. For some people, silence isn't emptiness, it's intention, it's control. It's the choice to decide what parts of their life the world doesn't get access to. Because whether we notice it or not, social media has subtly reshaped how we define ourselves. It rewards exposure, it celebrates noise, it teaches us that being seen is the same as being valuable. And yet, those who stay on the sidelines are often the ones who see the clearest. They observe without interrupting. They pause before responding. They reflect before forming opinions. Psychological research suggests something intriguing. People who don't post often tend to score higher in self regulation, introspection, and emotional independence. They're less driven by comparison. They're less reliant on external validation. In other words, they're not trying to convince anyone of who they are. They're trying to understand themselves. And in a world overflowing with performance, that's rare. Because let's be honest, most online sharing isn't just communication, it's identity construction. It's a subtle request for belonging. Every post quietly asks, "This is me. Is it acceptable?" But when someone stops posting, something shifts. Their sense of worth slowly detaches from likes and reactions. They stop translating life into captions. Moments return to being lived, not displayed. That's the hidden psychology behind many people who choose not to post. They're searching for authenticity in a space that often feels artificial. They don't necessarily reject social media. They just no longer recognize themselves in it. It's not about rejecting technology or isolating from others. It's about refusing to compress a full, complex life into a highlight reel. Once you understand how easily perception can be curated, you begin to value what can't be shared: quiet, depth, imperfection, truth. For some, stepping back from posting comes after emotional fatigue. Maybe they once shared everything until one day it stopped feeling honest. Every beautiful moment came with pressure to outperform the last one, to maintain the image. Life stopped being lived. It became a performance. So they left, softly, no announcement, no explanation, just a gradual disappearance from the feed. And here's what's often misunderstood: not posting doesn't mean not caring, it doesn't mean emotional distance. Often it means the opposite. It means caring deeply, about presence, about meaning, about protecting what feels sacred. There's a concept in psychology called psychological ownership: the feeling that an experience truly belongs to you, a memory, a thought, a moment. The instant it's posted, that ownership weakens. It becomes open to judgment, interpretation, misunderstanding. So people who don't post are often protecting their relationship with their own lives. They keep their experiences untouched, private, intact, theirs. And maybe that isn't withdrawal. Maybe it's a quiet kind of freedom. Think about it. When was the last time you did something meaningful without feeling the urge to share it? When did you last laugh, cry, or succeed without thinking about posting it online? That impulse to display isn't natural, it's learned. It's the result of years of likes, shares, and dopamine loops, training our brains to equate validation with worth. When someone steps outside that system, it can look like rebellion, but it can also be healing. They rediscover the simplicity of doing things purely for themselves: cooking without documenting it, traveling without tagging it, feeling without explaining it. In that space, something returns: a form of self awareness that doesn't require an audience, But not everyone who stays silent online does so from a place of peace. For some, silence is driven by fear of judgment, fear of rejection, fear of being misunderstood. Social media has intensified a quiet anxiety psychologists call self presentational pressure, the constant tension of managing how one is perceived. It's that constant sense of being observed even when no one is actively watching. And for many people, that awareness becomes draining. They worry their words might be misunderstood, or worse, pass by unnoticed. So they pull back. Not because they don't want connection, but because the price of visibility feels too high. They want to be seen, but only in a way that feels real, not shallow. And ironically, some of the quietest people online carry the loudest inner worlds. They aren't empty, they're full. They simply choose stillness over performance. There's something deeply philosophical in that choice. In a world that constantly demands attention, choosing invisibility becomes a way of defining oneself. It's a silent statement. I exist beyond your gaze. They scroll through other people's lives, sometimes smiling, sometimes feeling a quiet ache. But they rarely project themselves outward because they understand something many don't. Not every experience is meant to be witnessed. Some of the most meaningful parts of life growth, grief, healing, transformation unfold quietly without an audience. And after living through enough of those unseen changes, you begin to realize something important. Being unseen is not the same as being unimportant. In fact, it's often where identity is formed rather than displayed. That's the paradox. Social media was built to connect us, yet it frequently leaves people feeling more alone. When you stop posting, you stop chasing digital closeness and start rebuilding real connection. You begin to notice who reaches out without prompts, who remembers you without reminders. That kind of connection, unfiltered, undocumented, feels heavier, warmer, more real. And that's the space people who don't post often live in. They form relationships that don't require proof. They find comfort in moments that never get shared. They allow life to happen without turning it into content. Part of this is about identity security, knowing who you are even when no one is watching. When you're at ease with yourself, you don't need an audience to confirm your worth. That isn't ego, it's peace. And interestingly, the people who stay quiet online often have the richest stories. They just save them for face to face conversations, not screens. Because real connection isn't measured in likes or comments, it lives in shared silence, in eye contact, in laughter that doesn't need witnesses. These are people who carry entire worlds inside them, who observe deeply, who feel intensely, who understand quietly. They don't need applause to justify their existence. They simply need to live. And maybe, just maybe, in a culture desperate to be seen, their silence isn't a weakness, it's a mirror, a reminder that not everything meaningful needs to be shared, that sometimes the most human act is keeping something entirely your own. Here's something fascinating. The longer someone stays away from social media, the more their perception of the world shifts. Colors seem richer, time slows down, conversations feel fuller. It's as if stepping away from the noise makes life tangible again. Because when you stop performing, you start truly experiencing. There's a quiet beauty in moving through life without needing proof of every moment. You're no longer thinking about angles, lighting, or captions. You're present, inside the experience, not observing it from the outside. And that's something social media rarely allows. But the psychology behind this goes deeper than personal preference. It's rooted in how our brains respond to validation. Every time a post gets attention, likes, comments, reactions, the brain releases dopamine, the same chemical linked to reward and addiction. Over time, the mind begins to crave that response. Life starts to feel valuable only when it's shareable. Now imagine someone who resists that cycle, someone who intentionally steps away from the dopamine loop. That isn't indifference, that's discipline. It takes awareness to resist systems designed to keep you engaged. People who don't post often have a strong internal locus of control. Their sense of worth and happiness comes from within, not from external approval. They don't need the digital echo of you matter to believe it. And here's what makes it even more compelling. Research shows that people who take extended breaks from posting or consuming social media often report increased emotional stability and greater life satisfaction. Because when your identity is no longer constantly reflected back at you, it solidifies. It becomes grounded. It becomes real. You stop editing your life to make it consumable. You start living it as it is, in all its messy, beautiful, unfiltered fullness. And maybe that's the real rebellion, remaining whole in a world that rewards fragments. But silence online doesn't always come from calm. Sometimes it carries exhaustion. For many people, social media began as a place of connection, but slowly became a source of emotional drain. There's a quiet fatigue that builds when you're constantly exposed to everyone else's highlight reels while you're still assembling your own life behind the scenes. Even when you try not to, comparison creeps in. Doubt follows. You start questioning your worth even when you know better. And eventually, some people step back. Not out of resentment, but out of self preservation. They realize they don't owe the world a performance. They don't owe explanations for their absence. And they don't need to prove their happiness just to be believed. That's one of the unspoken truths of this generation. We've learned to confuse visibility with value. We assume that to matter, we must be seen. But real meaning doesn't require witnesses. Some of the most important moments of your life, the ones that quietly shape who you become, will happen without an audience. No cameras, no captions, no validation, just you living it. And that's something people who don't post often understand deeply. They know that privacy isn't isolation, it's intimacy with yourself. Because when you stop broadcasting every thought, you begin to hear your own again. You reconnect with parts of yourself that were drowned out by noise, your quieter desires, your unspoken fears, your inner sense of direction. And in today's world, that kind of reconnection is almost spiritual. It's not withdrawal, it's a return home. Of course, it isn't always easy. There are moments of doubt, moments when you wonder if staying silent makes you invisible, if you're falling behind while everyone else seems to be displaying progress. But over time, something gentle reveals itself. Your worth doesn't vanish when no one is watching, it remains steady, grounded, like the calm that settles after a storm has passed. And maybe that's what real confidence looks like. Not loud self assertion online, but quiet self assurance offline. People sometimes joke, if you didn't post it, did it even happen? But the truth is, the experiences that shape you most rarely ever reach the feed. Your growth, your heartbreaks, your private wins, your quiet kindnesses, they live in memory, not media. And maybe that's enough. When psychologists talk about authentic self expression, they emphasize congruence, the alignment between who you are inside and what you show to the world. But in an age of filters and performance, that alignment is constantly distorted. You begin living as a version of yourself edited for approval. So when someone chooses not to post, it may be their way of staying aligned, of protecting the fragile honesty between their inner and outer world. They don't need others to witness their emotions to know they're real. They don't need to document every sunset to remember how it felt. They live fully, quietly. And here's the paradox. Those who live quietly often feel life more intensely. They aren't distracted by performing it. They notice details others overlook, the shift of light across a wall, the pause before someone speaks, the echo of distant laughter. They are present. And presence is one of the rarest currencies in a world built on attention. Yet that same presence is often misunderstood. People may label them distant, mysterious, even cold. But if you look closer, their silence isn't emptiness, it's depth. It's the calm that comes from no longer needing to explain yourself in order to be understood. There's a quiet confidence in not needing to be known by everyone, only understood by a few. And that's something people who don't post understand well. They know not every truth belongs to the crowd. Some parts of you deserve protection from algorithms and opinions because once something becomes public, it no longer belongs entirely to you. It becomes subject to interpretation, judgment, trend, and maybe some moments are simply too sacred for that. So the next time you notice someone who never posts, don't assume they're hiding. Maybe they're just living. Maybe they've found peace in the quieter corners of existence, the ones untouched by screens and notifications. Maybe they've remembered something the rest of us forgot, that being unseen doesn't mean being alone, that being quiet doesn't mean being empty, that sometimes the truest expression of who you are is silence. Because in the end, we were never meant to be performances. We were meant to be human. And the people who don't post remind us of that. Every quiet, unfiltered, beautifully invisible day. Don't forget subscribe, like the video, and turn on notifications.